is resumed. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, with leave of the House, I move that we open privilege hour.
There's a motion to open the privilege hour. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we recognize Representative Robert Ace Barbers of the 2nd District of Surigao del Norte to avail of this privilege hour.
The Honorable Robert Ace Barbers from the 2nd District of Surigao del Norte is recognized for his privilege hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, I rise today on a matter of personal and collective privilege. My subject, the trolls and our adventures with them. Personal, as I am their victim. Collective, as we have all been victims in one way or the other. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. Thus says Edmund Burke. Republic Act number 10175, or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012, was enacted 12 years ago. Some of the more important provisions of the law, specifically Section 9, mandated that the National Bureau of Investigation, the Philippine National Police, as well as the Department of Justice, to implement the provisions of the law. And Section 10 gave them the powers for this purpose. Section 26 of the same law created the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordinating Center, or the CICC, under the Office of the President for the same purpose, and enumerated its powers and functions under Section 27. Alas, despite these provisions, Madam Speaker, cybercrimes are committed every single minute, unabated and seemingly unstoppable. The lack of visible active prevention, intervention, suppression, and prosecution of the perpetrators is felt by the aggrieved citizenry. Despite the powers given to these agencies, Madam Speaker, criminals are having a heyday every day in the web. We seem to be helpless. To state the obvious, Madam Speaker, dozens or hundreds, if not thousands of trolls, probably paid by pogo and drug money, relentlessly attack personalities with total impunity. This has been happening for years without let-up, Madam Speaker. They get away with it. That is why they continue to thrive. It is a business that has become so profitable without having to pay taxes, no liability, and with the pleasure of being able to ruin reputations of people without having to worry about getting caught and punished. The ultimate goal of the trolls, Madam Speaker, is to create chaos and disorder by sowing false information, confusion, fear, and slander their subjects. We must not let them win. Law and order must be preserved to ensure peace and stability in our society. Trolling is the means to destroy this peace and create chaos. These trolls get paid, and we all know that. The sheer number of trolls and the amount of false information that they flood the web with will give you an idea on the value or amount of money needed to pay them. Who is the innocent person who is bound to benefit from their trolling? Will this innocent person disburse enormous amount of money and laugh out loud at the false information being disseminated? Obviously, Madam Speaker, the ones funding these malicious campaigns are the ones hurting the most. They are also the ones who have the vast financial resources to pay these trolls. And who could they be? One thing is for sure, Madam Speaker, the money involved is staggering, which can only probably come from illegal pogos and drug syndicates operating in the country. Madaling ubusin ang hindi pinaghihirapan, ika nga. I rise to represent the aggrieved parties, which include no less than the President, government officials, including myself, and ordinary citizens who have been victims of these cybercrimes. I call to action all our agencies in charge of investigating these crimes to be more active and make their presence felt so that our people may be protected by the civil servants who draw salaries from their taxes. Do not be passive and wait for complaints to be filed before you act on the obvious transgressions of the law. I am filing my complaint here now, Madam Speaker, and I hope everybody's listening. We have been targets of these possibly pogo and drug money sponsored trolls and vloggers. I was just watching in the sidelines, waiting for some action from the PNP, the NBI, and the CICC. But I waited too long, Madam Speaker. I hope I'm not waiting in vain. Today, I am telling every peace-loving, truth-believing, and God-fearing good men and women of this country, let us not allow evil to triumph. Let us do everything for good to always reign on this land. To all you trolls and malicious vloggers, let me say this. It is all right to criticize us politicians. Kasama po sa trabaho at sa hazards ng public service yan. Pwede nyo kaming i-criticize hanggang magsawa kayo because we cannot be onion-skinned. You can criticize us all you want as long as your criticisms are anchored on the discharge of our official duties and functions. But when you cross the line, Madam Speaker, and impute malice on what we do and attack our persons, you cease to be protected by your constitutional rights. Even the Supreme Court ruled that when your statements are done with malice, you are liable under the law. Panindigan na lang ninyo ang paninira ninyo. Hindi naman pwede na porke politiko, pwede mo nang akusahan ng lahat ng krimen at kasinungalingan, tapos wala ka ring pananagutan? Ano ka? Siniswerte? Matapang ka manira. Matapang kang mangutya. Tapos ayaw mong sumagot? Paano kung halimbawa kami naman ang magsabi na ang pangit mo o ang baho ng hininga mo o iniiwan ka ng kinakasama mo na napakaputi kasi ang itim-itim mo at ang liit-liit ng tenga mo? O wala ka namang kwentang abogado. Puro ka lang media at pasikat sa media, pero sa korte, kulata ka naman. Kita nyo? Paninirang puri na ang ginagawa ninyo. Hindi na yan protektado ng mga batas. Ang batas ay para sa lahat. Hindi lang para sa iilan. Kung may nalalaman kayo na freedom of speech, wala naman pong freedom to defame, freedom to insult, or freedom to slander. Lahat ng freedom at karapatan ay hindi po absolute o walang katapusan. Kahit nga ang pinakauna at pinakaimportanteng right to life at liberty ay pwedeng alisin ng Estado upang pangalagaan ang buong lipunan at ang mga mamamayan nito. You may be imprisoned or executed upang panagutan ang mga kasalanan sa lipunan. No, Mr. Madam Speaker, enough is enough. We will not stand idly by anymore and allow your evil to triumph. We will do everything to make sure that you are brought to your senses and punished for your abuses and wanton disregard of the laws that safeguard everyone equally. In closing, Madam Speaker, I would like to extend my regards to all the trolls and the malicious vloggers out there and wish them the best of luck as they journey into another dimension called reality. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Salamat. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we refer the speech of the Honorable Ace Barbers to the Committee on Rules for its appropriate action.
There's a motion. Is there any objection? The chair is none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we terminate the privilege hour.
There's a motion to terminate the privilege hour. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move to take up additional reference of business and direct the Secretary to read the titles of the measures.
The Secretary is directed to read the titles of bills, resolutions, committee reports, and communications on first reading.
Additional reference of business. Bills on first reading. House Bill 11160, providing for the reintegration of repatriated OFWs into the Philippine workforce and business sector by Representative Plato.
To the Committee on Overseas Workers' Affairs.
House Bill 11161, authorizing the accrual of earmark revenues to the general fund and prescribing the conditions under which such funds may be used for other expenditures in the General Appropriations Act by Representative Herrera.
To the Committee on Appropriations.
Resolutions. House Resolution 2107, expressing profound condolences of the House of Representatives on the demise of former Senator Santanina Tila Rasul by Representative Olivares.
To the Committee on Rules.
House Resolution 2108, expressing the profound condolences of the House on the passing of former Senator Santanina Tila Rasul, the first Muslim woman member of the Senate of the Philippines by Representative Badyong.
To the Committee on Rules.
House Resolution 2109, congratulating and commending chess master Mario Mangubat for winning the new FIDE World Senior 65+ Rapid Champion by Representative Olivares.
To the Committee on Youth and Sports Development.
House Resolution 2110, congratulating and commending Honorable Justice Fernanda Lampas Peralta as the new presiding justice of the Court of Appeals by Representative Olivares.
To the Committee on Justice.
Communications. Various communications submitted to the House by officials of several municipalities relative to their posting and reporting requirements of the fund utilization and status of program, project implementation of the Local Government Support Fund as attested by their respective municipal mayors.
To the Committee on Appropriations.
Committee reports. Committee Report 1288, submitted by the Committees on Transportation and Appropriations on House Bill 11165. Committee Report 1289, submitted by the Committee on Youth and Sports Development on House Resolution 2112. Committee Report 1290, submitted by the Committees on Basic Education and Culture and Appropriations on House Bill 11167. Committee Report numbers 1291 to 1296, submitted by the Committees on Tourism and Appropriations on House Bill numbers 11168 to 11173, respectively.
The aforementioned committee reports are all referred to the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, considering that copies of Journal Number 25, dated November 26 and 27, 2024, and Journal Number 26, dated December 2, 2024, were already distributed to the members, I move to dispense with the reading thereof and subsequently to approve the said journals. I so move, Madam Speaker.
There's a motion. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. The reading of the said journals is dispensed with, and Journal Number 25, dated November 26 and 27, 2024, and Journal Number 26, dated December 2, 2024, and are hereby approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we recognize the guests of the Honorable Deputy Speaker Christine Singson Mihan. These are Bileg Sugpon members, Sugpon Mayor Daniel Lanyo Jr., and Nestor Sagayo.
To my guests from the Bileg Sugpon members, headed by our Mayor, Sugpon Mayor Daniel Lanyo Jr. and Nestor Sagayo, welcome to the House of Representatives. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we likewise recognize the guests of the Honorable Christian Unabia, Attorney Lordan Suan, and Representative Bambi Emano. And these are the Sangguniang Bayan officials of the Municipality of Laguindingan, Province of Misamis Oriental, and the Sangguniang Bayan officials from the Municipality of Gitagum and Lugait of the Province of Misamis Oriental.
To the guests of the Honorable Christian Unabia, the Honorable Lordan Suan, and the Honorable Bambi Emano from the Sangguniang Bayan officials of the Municipality of Laguindingan, Province of Misamis Oriental, from the Sangguniang Bayan officials from the Municipality of Gitagum, and Sangguniang Bayan officials from the Municipality of Lugait, welcome to the House of Representatives. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, under the business for the day, I move that we consider House Bill number 11144 and as contained under Committee Report number 1276, submitted by the Committee on Suffrage and Electoral Reforms, and for this purpose, may I request the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the bill.
The Secretary General is directed to read the title of the measure.
House Bill number 11144, an act resetting the first regular elections in the Bangsamoro region in Muslim Mindanao, amending for the purpose Section 13, Article 16 of Republic Act number 11054 as amended, otherwise known as the Organic Law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao.
Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, the parliamentary status of the bill is that it is in the period of sponsorship and debate. I move that we recognize Representative Zia Alonto Adjong to sponsor the measure.
The Honorable Zia Alonto Adjong from the 1st District of Lanao del Sur is recognized for his sponsorship.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All praise is due to Allah, the sovereign creator of the universe, the God of no equal. Peace and blessings be upon the last messenger of God, the seal of the prophets, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Madam Speaker, honorable members of this esteemed House, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Madam Speaker, I rise today with great responsibility and a profound sense of purpose to sponsor House Bill number 11144, an act resetting the first regular elections in the Bangsamoro region in Muslim Mindanao, amending for the purpose Section 16, Section 13, Article 16 of Republic Act 11054 as amended, otherwise known as the Organic Law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. A measure, Madam Speaker, that is pivotal to sustaining the progress and stability of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. The proposed measure, Madam Speaker, provides that the first regular parliamentary elections in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARM, shall be held on the second Monday of May 2026, with subsequent elections to follow every 3 years thereafter. This timeline ensures a smooth transition while adhering to democratic principles and fostering political stability in the region. Madam Speaker, under Section 2 of House Bill 11144, the term of the current Bangsamoro Transition Authority, or BTA, will be deemed expired upon the effectivity of this law. To maintain governance continuity, the President shall appoint 18 new interim members of the BTA who shall serve in their capacity until their duly elected successors assume office. This provision ensures that governance in the BARM remains uninterrupted during the extended transition period, providing the region with the leadership and representation necessary to finalize foundational reforms and prepare for its first regular elections. Madam Speaker, to appreciate the gravity of this proposal, we must revisit the remarkable journey that has brought us to this moment. In March 2014, the signing of the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro between the Government of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front marked a momentous shift in our nation's history, a promise of peace, self-determination, and hope for generations of Bangsamoro people. This promise was codified into Republic Act 11054, or the Bangsamoro Organic Law, or BOL, enacted in 2018 and ratified overwhelmingly by the people in 2019. The Bangsamoro Transition Authority was established to lay the groundwork for this new era of self-governance. It was tasked with shaping institutions, addressing historical injustices, and ensuring representation for all, including non-Moro indigenous peoples, women, youth, traditional leaders, and settler communities. Madam Speaker, recognizing the immense responsibility placed upon the BTA, Congress enacted Republic Act 11593, moving the first BARM parliamentary elections from 2022 to 2025, allowing more time for the region to establish a firm foundation. Despite these efforts, Madam Speaker, challenges remain. Most recently, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the Bangsamoro Organic Law in September 2024, reaffirming its legitimacy but excluding the province of Sulu from the BARM, a decision that has created a complex legal and political landscape. Additionally, unresolved matters such as the integration of special geographic area municipalities into a prospective Cotabato province and the completion of electoral and sectoral representation frameworks underscore the pressing need for extended period for the Parliament to resolve and address. During the committee hearings for this measure, Madam Speaker, it was made abundantly clear that there is executive consensus in resetting the elections. All executive agencies involved unanimously agreed that the proposed extension is essential to ensure peaceful and fruitful elections. Their testimonies highlighted the need for additional time to address legal uncertainties, operationalize reforms, and finalize the structures necessary for the first regular elections under the Bangsamoro government. This consensus, Madam Speaker, underscores the necessity and the timelines and the timeliness of this proposed legislative action. House Bill 11144 addresses this request by providing the BTA the necessary time to overcome legal uncertainties, engage more stakeholders, and refine governance structures. This extension is not a delay of democracy, but a guarantee of its success in the Bangsamoro region. By allowing this transition to mature, we pave the way for a stronger, more inclusive BARM, one that is truly prepared to uphold its first regular elections under a stable and functional system. Honorable colleagues, Madam Speaker, this measure is more than a legislative act. It is a commitment to ensuring that the Bangsamoro people are not only heard, but empowered to shape their future. Madam Speaker, dear colleagues, let us reaffirm our dedication to peace, unity, and the promise of self-determination by supporting this measure. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we open the period of interpellation.
There's a motion to open the period of interpellation. Is there any objection? The Chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we recognize Representative Jonathan Keith Flores from the 2nd District of Bukidnon for his interpellation.
The Honorable Jonathan Keith Flores from the 2nd District of Bukidnon is recognized for his interpellation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the good sponsor and my friend Zia yield to some questions from these representations?
Madam Speaker, I will try my best to respond to the question of my silingan, the good gentleman from Bukidnon, Congressman Flores.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, as a neighbor of the BARM, of course, this is a concern shared not only by Mindanaoans, but I think by the rest of the nation. The purpose for the postponement that you are asking for, would it not be considered or perceived by some as an accommodation to help those who are currently in power at the BARM to prolong their stay as officers of the BARM?
Well, Mr. Speaker, not at all, to be honest with you, and to give my good friend a straight answer. Madam Speaker, this proposal is brought about by the recent ruling of the Supreme Court, stating that though the BARM is constitutionally sound, the plebiscite that was held in 2019 for Sulu asking not to be part of the BARM, therefore, the way that it was handled in the plebiscite as far as Sulu is concerned is unconstitutional, meaning, in effect, Sulu is no longer part of the core territory of BARM. And with that, Mr. Speaker, the impact of this new Supreme Court ruling is the 7 seats allotted to Sulu, which will, if we are to pursue this election in 2025, will then be left vacant, Mr. Speaker.
So the 7 seats, Mr. Speaker, representing the area of Sulu would be the basic consideration that you want to be addressed in form of in the question of representation as far as the province of these 7 seats are supposed to be representing.
That is correct, Mr. Speaker, because with the recent ruling of the Supreme Court, Sulu is no longer part of the BARM territory. The 80 seats, Mr. Speaker, is of course is composed of party representation, which covers, I guess, 50% of the seats in the parliament reserved for the party representation. 40% of that is reserved seats for the direct constituency representation. Sulu being part originally, initially under BARM, the core territory, Sulu has 7 seats. Now, Mr. Speaker, if we proceed with the elections in 2025 as scheduled, Mr. Speaker, the 7 seats will have to be decided supposedly by Sulu. But since Sulu is no longer part, the parliament needs more time to readjust itself, recalibrate the seats, and redistribute these seats to the 4 remaining core territory within BARM, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
But would this not, in effect, deprive the residents of BARM the right to choose the leaders that they want to, if the elections are to be postponed, just to give BARM time to look for where the 7 seats would be situated?
Well, in fact, it is the opposite, Mr. Speaker, because we are giving representation for each of the 7 seats allotted to Sulu to be redistributed to areas within the core territory of BARM. Meaning we're just resetting the election, allowing the parliament to readjust itself so that they can provide seats to those areas that are entitled to have an additional seats. Meaning, Mr. Speaker, Your Honors, it is actually the opposite of that because we are giving more freedom or more right for the constituencies within BARM to select their leaders as guaranteed under the BUL to choose for additional seats as they may be required or they may be entitled to for an additional seats, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. So it is not entirely to deprive the BARM government because the BARM constituency will also have to collect their own local leaders in the form of, they can elect their governors, congressmen, etc. But as far as the parliament is concerned, which is, by the way, a new form of government, it is but proper, Mr. Speaker, that the Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament needs more time to reallocate these seats. So the question of whether or not we are depriving the Bangsamoro constituency to participate in an election, I don't think we are not, because they are also would elect their own set of officers in the local and in the national positions, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Well, I understand the importance of allowing time to determine where the 7 seats would be situated. But wouldn't we, in effect, be holding back the selection of the 73 others, the majority of the other members of parliament, by insisting on waiting for the other 7 seats to be replaced? Wouldn't it be hypocritical for us to say that we are for the right of the suffrage of the people in the BARM area, and at the same time withhold their right to choose the 73 other seats that they are supposedly entitled to select?
Mr. Speaker, it is a guaranteed right under the Constitution, the right to suffrage. But we also have to lay the foundation for the people to elect their leaders. It's not a matter of electing the leaders, it is also laying down the environment, the foundation for which these people can exercise these rights freely, orderly, and with an honest possible result of an election. So I guess on that context, Mr. Speaker, we are trying to lay down the foundation, laying down the ground for it to be fertile, that once we hold the election, the BARM seats and the constituency of the BARM would have to elect and would and have an election honestly, fairly, orderly and with anticipation that the result of the possible elections in 2026 would reflect the real mandate of the people, that they would be given to all the leaders that they may select to lead them in the Bangsamoro Regional Government, Mr. Speaker. On that context, Mr. Speaker, I hope my good friend from Bukidnon would fully understand this nuance that has brought about by the ruling of the Supreme Court recently in September 2024. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Well, I understand that the parliament system is new, but the practice of voting and the exercise of the right of suffrage has never been denied to the residents of BARM. In fact, in every elections, they have always participated and exercised the right to vote. So how then would it be different if we say that now it is to lay the basic foundation of voting or the exercise of suffrage when that right has never been denied to the residents of BARM?
Because, Mr. Speaker, under the BARM, it is something that is different in terms of structure and form. Though, yes, I agree that in every elections, every 3 years, the BARM region also participate in general elections. Every 3 years, barangay elections and the local and the national elections. But in the context of the BARM, since we are electing direct representation through party representation, direct representation in a parliamentary form, Mr. Speaker. And with the requirement, Mr. Speaker, as laid down under the BUL, that the BARM has to make its own Bangsamoro electoral code. See, Mr. Speaker, the 80 seats is not only composed of the party representation, the direct representation, it is also composed, 10% of that would be allotted to sectoral representation, Mr. Speaker. The difference between the party list representatives, the system that we are observing and exercising in the national political system, Mr. Speaker, with that of BARM, is the sectoral representative is every year is given, the sectors are given their own unique way of selecting their own representatives. They are not to be subjected to general elections, but rather all party organizations, meaning those who are probably, an example, those who probably be joining the women's sector would have their own system on how they would select their representative to the parliament. They are not subjected to general elections, but they have their way, a mechanism unique to them in order that they can choose who's going to be their representative to the parliament. So it is something that is unique, that is required by the BUL. So until and unless the Bangsamoro Electoral Code is finally implemented. Oh, by the way, if my memory serves me right, Mr. Speaker, the Bangsamoro Electoral Code is also still faces questions before the Supreme Court. So again, Mr. Speaker, these are the requirements set by the BUL. And so for the BARM to fully engage itself with its stakeholders through an election, we have to give way a lot more time for the Bangsamoro Parliament to readjust, to reconfigure its seats, and also to make sure that the Bangsamoro Election Board will be finally established and ready, Mr. Speaker, to perform its mandates as stipulated under the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, I'm just confused as to how much more time would we need to explain to the people of BARM that this is the new form of government. We've already postponed this election once. How much more time is needed to explain that form of government if that is the reason why we are giving them more time to understand the new changes in the government? Because for me, I think the system of the system of voting is still the same. It's still exercising the right of suffrage, which has never been denied to the people of BARM, and in fact, which has always been exercised by the people of BARM. So what more do we need to explain to them as to how these changes are to affect their right to suffrage?
I think it's the kind of maturity that we also need to introduce to the constituency in the BARM. You see, the sectoral representation, Mr. Speaker, is given primacy in the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Just to cite you an example, and to continue on my argument, Mr. Speaker, that there are certain seats that are reserved for sectoral representation. Even those Bangsamoro who are residing outside of the BARM are guaranteed with a seat in the parliament, Mr. Speaker. So Again, they need to, on the ground, Mr. Speaker, they need to formulate their own, organize their own communities, organize their own groups in order that they can fully participate in the coming elections. Right now, Mr. Speaker, the Bangsamoro, the COMELEC has yet to continue on accepting, Mr. Speaker, those party list representations, those party list groups who are wanting to participate in the 2025 elections. But then again, with the requirement set by the BUL for the creation of the Bangsamoro Electoral Code and for the creation of the Bangsamoro Election Board in the BAR, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the examples that I guess they need to set up and they need to establish first effectively for them to operate before we can hold, Mr. Speaker, before we can hold, Mr. Speaker, the BAR parliamentary elections. Notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, the fact that there is also, again, and just to go back to my previous statement and argument, Mr. Speaker, that Sulu cannot be considered as something that is inconsequential for the determination of this House, Mr. Speaker, to either pursue or to postpone or to reset the elections. Because number one, Mr. Speaker, Sulu has already been part since the time immemorial, since the 1976 Tripoli Agreement up to the time that the CAB was signed in 2014, that Sulu was part of the core territory of the BARM. The anticipation, Mr. Speaker, is once we hold the elections, nobody should be left behind, but it's because that is the spirit of the BUL. Everything and everyone should be included once we hold the first parliamentary elections. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, with this memberment of the BARM, meaning Sulu has already been excluded, Mr. Speaker, and with the setting up of the 63 barangays to constitute a possible Cotabato province, and with the establishment of how these organizations, sectoral organizations, are to participate in the general elections in the BARM, this consideration, Mr. Speaker, lay down the ground for this representation to possibly propose a timeline, Mr. Speaker, for the BARM to hold instead of this coming years for their election and then extend it, Mr. Speaker, for another year. Again, precisely because the BTA Parliament has to resolve these legal peculiarities that has brought about by the SC ruling and with the establishment of the Bangsamoro Election Board, Mr. Speaker, in the BARM.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, you brought up the issue of the Supreme Court ruling on the issue of Sulu. The Supreme Court categorically said that the decision is immediately executory. What then would we be waiting for if the Supreme Court itself said that it is immediately executory?
We are debating, Mr. Speaker, the composition of the 7 seats of the 80 seats of the 80 parliamentary seats in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Speaker, the BTA, rather, the Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament. We're talking about the 80 seats, Mr. Speaker, in the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, which basically, Mr. Speaker, in effect, by the SC ruling, leaving 7 seats vacant and subject for recalibration and reconfiguration and redistribution to other areas that are still considered to be part of the core territory within BAR, Mr. Speaker.
In fact, Madam Speaker, the Supreme Court even came out with a clarificatory message as far as their decision is concerned. And the spokesperson categorically said that immediately executory means that the decision should be fully implemented despite the pending motion for reconsideration. It further said that there should be no reason for the court to say it was immediately executory if it intended otherwise. The court, consistent with its prior rulings, issued the order making the decision immediately executory, knowing that the election cannot be postponed. Madam Speaker, we cannot use the exclusion of Sulu from the Supreme Court ruling as a continued excuse to postpone the elections of the BARM, Madam Speaker. Other than that, Madam Speaker, that it is immediately executory, is also the guidelines set forth in Makalintal versus Comelec, where postponements cannot just be made unless it falls within the parameters set forth by the Supreme Court decision. Now, wouldn't passing this law be going against the express decisions of the Supreme Court, Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, let me also clarify, Mr. Speaker, and this is not in any way to argue with the able lawyer, one of the able lawyers in this House, Mr. Speaker, but just so that he mentioned earlier and emphasize the decision of the Supreme Court on Makalintal versus Comelec, Mr. Speaker. Under the same ruling, Mr. Speaker, the Comelec confirms and reaffirms the power and the mandate of this House to reset elections, Mr. Speaker, with the requirement and criteria for any postponement to happen and for any resetting of election to happen under the Makalintal versus Comelec, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to cite to you, Mr. Speaker, one of the requirements that it should be a substantial and compelling reasons that necessitate the postponement of the elections, meaning necessitated by public emergency, but only if and to the extent strictly guaranteed by the exigencies of the situation, Mr. Speaker. And it also goes on, Mr. Speaker, in the same, Mr. Speaker, SC ruling, that the postponement of the election must be justified by reasons sufficiently important and substantial, or again, compelling under the present circumstance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we think, Mr. Speaker, from the position of this representation, and with the exclusion of Sulu now, that it has a direct impact in the 80 seats parliament, Mr. Speaker. This is a substantial and compelling reasons enough for us to postpone or to reset the election from 2025 to 2026. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because the parliament cannot simply act and operate without these 7 seats. Remember, Mr. Speaker, in the parliamentary setup, where the members of the parliament not only exercises legislative functions, but they're also exercising executive powers, Mr. Speaker. This is a combined powers in the parliament, Mr. Speaker. There's no differentiation as to the exercise of these 2 powers, Mr. Speaker. 1 seat, 2 seats, how much more 7 seats are very much important in order for a government of the day to be established, Mr. Speaker. That is a compelling reason and a substantial reason, Mr. Speaker, for this representation, as guaranteed under Makalintal versus Comelec, for this representation, for my other authors, Mr. Speaker, to request this House that before we can even hold the elections in the BARM, we must go back, Mr. Speaker, to laying down the foundation and allow the Bangsamoro Parliament to redistribute the 7 seats so that they can fully function as a parliament, so that they can also be, they can also guarantee, Mr. Speaker, that the 8 seats will be not only represented but participatory in the forming of a system that is unique in the Bangsamoro regional government, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So is a good sponsor saying that the Bangsamoro cannot operate without 7 out of the 86
That is
members
correct.
of Parliament?
Yes. Just to give you a straight answer and short answer, Mr. Speaker, yes, it cannot operate without the 7 seats vacant, Mr. Speaker.
Would a
Your
good
Honor.
sponsor say that, what about the suggestion that 7 be appointed and the rest be elected and we proceed with the elections?
Well, I don't know with the interpretation or the appreciation of any legal precedents, Mr. Speaker, by my distinguished colleague here, but I don't think an elected officials and an appointed officials in one parliamentary setup can be perfectly fit, Mr. Speaker, that you can do hybrid representation, Mr. Speaker. So if we are to hold any elections, guarantee the right of the people to elect their new leaders, might as well have all the 80 be presented to the people so that they can elect them once and for all, and not to combine an appointment in an election in one setting, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
So is a good sponsor saying that he's opposed to the appointment of members to temporarily fill the 7 vacancies that will be left with the exclusion of Sulu?
Can the good gentleman ask again his question? Because
My question, Madam Speaker, is the good sponsor opposing the suggestion that only the 7 could be appointed and the rest elected?
yes, that is correct, Mr. Speaker. If we are to appoint members of the Bangsamoro Transition Parliament, they should be all appointed, all the 80. If we are to allow, Mr. Speaker, for the assumption of this office through an election, then let us subject all these 80 seats to an election, to a general election, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Wouldn't it be contradictory to the fact that all the present members are appointed
They
and
are-
yet they serve the BARM pretty well? Would you agree, Mr. Sponsor?
No, Mr. Speaker, because that is the prescription under the Bangsamoro Organic Law, that during the transition period, Mr. Speaker, from ARM to BARM, all the 80 members shall be appointed by the President and shall be led by the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, you correctly quoted the provision of the decision of the Supreme Court when it said that to be sufficiently important, the reason for the postponement must primarily be justified by the need to safeguard the right of suffrage or the fundamental rights or required by a public emergency situation. Now, going over the bill, I could summarize that the reasons provided are, one, to provide additional time for the BARM to resolve various emerging legal issues. Two, to promote broader participation from political parties. And three, to allow for the region to have a more enhanced understanding of the new electoral process. Would the kind sponsor please explain if this would fall within the parameters issued by the Supreme Court in Makalintal versus Executive Secretary or COMELEC, that it must be of serious reasons before we pass or before Congress passes any law postponing any election for that matter?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, it fits perfectly well with the given criteria under the Makalintal versus Comelec, Mr. Speaker. Because just to give a straight answer and simple answer, if you don't have the 10% sectoral representation, the parliament cannot function. If you don't have the Bangsamoro Electoral Board to certify and to validate organizations who are wanting to be part through an election by way of sectoral representations, Parliament cannot function. If you don't have the 7 seats, Mr. Speaker, allotted for Sulu, and if you leave that vacant, the Parliament exercising both the legislative functions and executive powers, the entire bureaucracy of the BARM cannot operate, Mr. Speaker. If you have, Mr. Speaker, the fate of the 63 barangays, which should supposedly ineligible to constitute one province, and for them, Mr. Speaker, to secure a seat in the parliament for the Bangsamoro cannot function, Mr. Speaker. Those are the reasons why this representation feels, Mr. Speaker, that the administration and the running of the affairs of the entire the bureaucracy of the bar, Mr. Speaker, is at stake, Mr. Speaker, at this point in time, with the problems, the legal problems that has brought about by these enumerated reasons that I've mentioned to you, Mr. Speaker, and Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, which again fits perfectly, Mr. Speaker, with the wordings that were used in the Supreme Court's ruling under Makalintal versus Comelec, compelling and substantial, Mr. Speaker. Reasons for this Congress to effect a postponement or resetting of an election, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, if we are to follow that line of argument, then the elections could always be held hostage by them not completing the Bangsamoro election law, and by failing to comply with these legal requirements for sectoral representation, and thus make that a continuing argument to further postpone every election. Then that could not be the reasons why, or thought of by the Supreme Court when it came up with these parameters set forth in the case of Makalintal versus Comelec. I cannot simply agree, Madam Speaker, that the reasons for postponing it further is actually going to be traced back to their inability to pass certain things, Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this is the current situation that we are in. That is why, Mr. Speaker, if you go back to the proposed bill, the, the nomenclature and the terminology that was used in the heading, in the title of the bill, is to reset the election and not to extend the transition period, Mr. Speaker. Meaning, it is also a notice, Mr. Speaker, if I may use the word, to the Bangsamoro government that the House of Representatives, the Congress, will be giving them more time to adjust because we don't fault the Parliament with the recent Supreme Court decision. Nobody expected that to happen. And so we are giving them more time, Mr. Speaker, primarily to readjust itself and to redistribute the seats, Mr. Speaker. And so we are resetting the elections and not essentially to continue on or to extend the transition period, Mr. Speaker. If my good friend from Bukidnon would like to scan over the draft bill, Mr. Speaker, the very purpose of why we chose that terminology, Mr. Speaker, is that we also would like for the Bangsamoro government and for this House, Mr. Speaker, to be guaranteed that any possible extension of an election should not be at least be given that primacy, Mr. Speaker, as we did in the previous two Congresses when we extended the transition period from 3 years and then with an additional 3 years. And now, Mr. Speaker, we're standing here to discuss about an additional 1 year, Mr. Speaker, of the Bangsamoro government. We are just giving them the 1 year, Mr. Speaker, because of, number one, of the Sulu inclusion. No matter how we skirt around and not use Sulu as our main contention, Mr. Speaker, we cannot avoid the fact that it has a direct, substantial effect, Mr. Speaker, in the composition of the Bangsamoro Parliament, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, how can we guarantee something that is totally dependent on the action or inaction of the current members of the Bangsamoro Authority?
Mr. Speaker, I argue on the basis of the presumption of regularity, as my good friend here would agree with me, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we would, I guess, the President, Mr. Speaker, if this proposed measure will be enacted, Mr. Speaker, giving the President the authority, exercising his supervisionary powers, Mr. Speaker, to appoint new set of officers, then I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, the President will appoint those who are capable, competent, to make sure that within 1 year, they can deliver all the things and the measures and the laws that they need to deliver and enact. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Again, Mr. Speaker, that kind of promises will end up with the same situation where it will still be dependent on them to act on something that they should have acted beforehand, Mr. Speaker. But anyway, going to another topic, Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, what about the cost that will be incurred by the government should we postpone the elections for BARM?
Well, for one, Mr. Speaker, COMELEC will have to save more from the supposed budget. That's number one. The possible expenses that they are earmarked should we proceed with the BARM will be saved by COMELEC. That's number one, Mr. Speaker. If my good friend here is asking me about the expenses for the operation of the BARM bureaucracy, I believe my good friend here is very well much aware that they have annually a funding needed for the Bangsamoro Transition Authority to operate, and this is in the form of the Black Grant, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, actually my question was, if elections are to be held a year after and not together with the national elections, how much is COMELEC expected to spend simply for the BARM elections?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I apologies if I cannot give you a straight answer, Mr. Speaker, as to the figure. But that would also depend on the next budget cycle, Mr. Speaker, since we are expecting if this bill will be passed by this House, and be enacted, Mr. Speaker, later on, that would still be a subject in the next budget cycle because the bill the bill is proposing for the 2026 elections for the BARM. So I guess that would be a subject in the next year budget cycle, and I'm pretty sure, 100% sure, that my good friend from Bukidnon will still be here serving his constituency, ably representing his district in Bukidnon, Mr. Speaker, in the 20th Congress, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, if you could just confirm that COMELEC said in one of their presentations that if special elections were to be held for BARM alone, COMELEC is expected to spend another 3 billion pesos just for their elections. Will the good sponsor confirm that?
If the COMELEC, yes, if I believe, Mr. Speaker, during the committee hearing, Mr. Speaker, it was mentioned. Apologies to the good gentleman because he has a good hearing. Mas maganda po yung kanyang pandinig. But I guess I confirm, Mr. Speaker, that was the COMELEC's statement response when they were asked in the previous committee hearing. But then again, COMELEC, Mr. Speaker, is ready to hold the election should this bill will not be enacted in due time, Mr. Speaker. There's already an allotted budget for the holding of the BARM elections, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, well, I understand that the good sponsor is facing a dilemma on where to place the 7 other representatives or members of parliament with the exclusion of Sulu. I just hope that we could come up with a better explanation so as to avoid another Supreme Court decision rendering our law unconstitutional. Because I really think now, while there are good reasons for the proponent to propose the postponement of the elections, I think we still have to come up with a plausible explanation that would support this bill and not just render all our efforts to help BARM futile. Because from how it stands right now, I still am not better and more convincing reasons, not just for myself, but really to defend our position before the Supreme Court should this law be questioned before it. Again, I would like to thank the good sponsor, Congressman Zia Jong, and for answering my question. Thank you, Madam Speaker, Mr. Sponsor.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to respond to that, Mr. Speaker. I agree and I respect the position of my good friend, Congressman Flores. Let me just go back to the previous Congresses, Mr. Speaker. It was not a postponement of election that happened in the 8th Congress. It was an extension of the transition period. Which I guess the direct effect of that is the rescheduling of the election from 2022 to 2025. So it was an extension of the transition period. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, I apologize, Mr. Speaker, if all of the reasons laid down in the law are not good enough for my good friend here. But what I'm giving here are not good reasons. I'm giving him the legal reasons and the compelling reasons that would probably convince the members of this House to support this bill simply because of the exclusion of Sulu, which has a great impact. I'm talking about the operation of the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. If all those 7 seats will be left vacant, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the reasons that I'm trying to point out, Mr. Speaker, may be not good enough for some of the members here, but I'm just giving you the legal implications, the legal reasons why this representation feels that we would give more time for the Parliament to readjust and redistribute the seats. Because we're talking here, Mr. Speaker, of the operation of the Bangsamoro Parliament, which is not just established simply because we want to give them autonomy. This was established because of a political settlement, Mr. Speaker, born out from decades of conflict in my areas and in Mindanao, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we suspend consideration of House Bill number 11144. I so move, Madam Speaker.
There's a motion. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority.
Castillo. SB Member George C. Castillo. SB Member Samuel Cabadunga. SB Member Pearly Sibud. SB Member Eugene Hambaro. Sabado Tomitay. Horaida Carillo. Vivian Lerio. Mary Beth Calexterio, and Mary Gold Dimla.
To the guests of the Honorable Antonieta Ate Tata R. Udela, the visitors from the 2nd District of Zamboanga, Sibugay, welcome to the House of Representatives. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we likewise recognize the guests of the Honorable Christine Alexi Tutor, and these are the guests of the Committee on Civil Service and Professional Regulation, who are officials and human resource practitioners from 36 government agencies who attended the last cluster meeting for calendar year 2024 of the Civil Service Commission Field Office.
To the guests of the Honorable Christine Alexi Tutor, welcome to the House of Representatives. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we also recognize the guests of the Honorable Bernadette Det Escudero, who include vice mayors of the 1st and 2nd District of Sorsogon and municipal councilors of Magallanes, Sorsogon. And these are Magallanes Vice Mayor Augusto Ragragio, Casiguran Vice Mayor Dennis Escudero, Irosin Vice Mayor Christian Lim, Cuban Vice Mayor Felipe Guasa, Cubat Vice Mayor Valentin Cura IV, Prieto Diaz Vice Mayor Avon Domalaon, Castilla Vice Mayor Vicente Manata, Bulusan Vice Mayor Wenny Rafalio, Santa Magdalena Vice Mayor Ramon Espela, and the municipal councilors Ruben Conda, Roy Carrascal, Michael Hakihaka, Alfredo Camacho Jr., Misaela Melia Jr., and SK Federation President Ruelia Armenta.
To the guests of the Honorable Bernadette Det Escudero from the 1st District of Sorsogon, including the vice mayors of the 1st and 2nd District of Sorsogon, municipal councilors of Magallanes, Sorsogon, welcome to the House of Representatives. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we consider bills under calendar of business from Thursdays to Fridays. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to our rules, allow me to put forth an omnibus motion for the consideration of the following. House Bill number 11125, under Committee Report 1269. House Bill number 11126, under Committee Report 1270. House Bill number 11128, under Committee Report 1272. House Bill number 11129, under Committee Report 1273.
The Secretary General is directed to read the titles of the measures.
House Bill 11125, an act revising the technical descriptions of foreshore land areas covered by the Balanga Wetland Nature Park Ecotourism Zone, located in Barangay Tortugas, City of Balanga, Province of Bataan, amending for the Purpose Republic Act number 11365, entitled An Act Declaring the Balanga Wetland and Nature Park, located in Barangay Tortugas, City of Balanga, Province of Bataan, as a responsible community-based ecotourism zone and appropriating funds therefor. House Bill 11126, an act declaring the Onay Beach, located in the municipality of Lawang, Province of Northern Samar, a tourism destination. House Bill 11128, an act declaring Barangay Rubas, the municipality of Haro, Province of Leyte, an ecotourism destination. House Bill 11129, an act declaring the 100 Islands National Park, located in the city of Alaminos, Province of Pangasinan, a tourism zone.
Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we consider the respective explanatory note as the sponsorship of the said measures.
There's a motion. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, there being no members who wish to interpolate for the said bills, I move that we terminate the period of interpolation.
There's a motion to end the period of interpellation. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we open the period of amendments and approve the committee amendments, if any, as considered in the respective committee reports of the aforementioned bills.
There is a motion. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, there being no individual amendments, I move that we terminate the period of amendments.
There's a motion to terminate the period of amendment. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we vote on second reading the following House Bill 11125, 11126, 11128, and 11129.
There's a motion for an omnibus approval of the following House bills: 11125, House Bill 11126, House Bill 11128, and House Bill 11129. Those are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those are against say nay. The ayes have it. The aforementioned House bills is approved on second reading. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with our rules governing inquiries in aid of legislation, I move to refer the following House resolutions to the appropriate committees. House Resolution 2087 to the Committee on Public Accounts, House Resolution 2093 to the Committee on Public Order and Safety, House Resolution number 2094 to the Committee on Labor and Employment, House Resolution number 2095 to the Committee on Banks and Financial Intermediaries, and House Resolution number 2102 to the Committee on Public Accounts.
There's a motion to refer the aforementioned House resolutions to the appropriate committees. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, pursuant to our rules governing inquiries in aid of legislation, I move to refer the following speeches delivered on November 25 to the appropriate committees. The speech of Representative Plato to the Committee on Welfare of Children, the speech of Representative Acharon to the Committee on Justice, the speech of Representative Vergara to the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the speech of Representative Robes to the Committee on Disaster Resilience, the speech of Representative Adyong to the Special Committee on Peace, Reconciliation, and Unity, the speech of Representative Sendanya to the Committee on Health, the speech of Representative Brosas to the Committee on Women and Gender Equality, and the speech of Representative Franz Castro to the Committee on Basic Education and Culture.
There's a motion to refer the aforementioned speeches delivered on November 25, 2024 to the appropriate committees. Is there any objection? The chair is none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move to include additional co-authors to House Bill number 11144 and House Resolution numbers 2082, 2098, 2099, and 2100 as contained in the list to be submitted by the Committee on Rules.
There's a motion to include additional co-authors to House Bills number 11144 and House Resolution numbers 2082, 2098, 2099, and 2100 as contained in the list to be submitted by the Committee on Rules. Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The motion is approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move
The Honorable.
We'd like
Majority
the SecGen to read these particular measures where there will be co-authors, because we might also be minded on the floor to be co-authors of these measures. And we have the reading of the measures that were mentioned.
The Secretary just directed to read the following House bills and House resolution. No, we don't have. Session suspended.